The queen asked a mysterious widow, "Why are you standing before the prince's tomb?" Until the night had a strange stillness over the kingdom. The moon hung high above the royal necropolis, casting pale silver light over rows of ancient tombs and statues. Mist crawled across the ground like living fingers, curling around stone monuments that had watched centuries pass. Somewhere in the shadows, the wind whispered secrets no one dared speak aloud. A woman stood before one of the largest tombs, wrapped in a dark velvet cloak. Even from a distance, her presence seemed unusual. She moved with a quiet grace, like someone who belonged more to the night than to the world of the living. Her hood was drawn low, hiding her face, but the way she paused, as if listening to the air itself, drew the attention of the guards stationed nearby. "Who is she?" one of the young guards whispered. "I don't know," another answered, unease in his voice. "But standing before the prince's tomb at this hour is forbidden." Inside the palace, the queen received word of the woman's presence. She was a tall woman herself, her posture regal and commanding, but her heart was heavy with sorrow. The prince, her only son, had died weeks ago, under circumstances that left the court in whispers and shadows. Though the kingdom mourned him openly, the queen's grief was private, a quiet ache she carried in every heartbeat. She stepped out of her chambers, her robe brushing the marble floors as she moved toward the necropolis. The cold air bit at her skin, but she did not notice. Her mind was focused on the figure by the tomb, this stranger who dared to stand there in the dead of night. The closer she came, the more she felt an unfamiliar emotion, a strange mixture of anger, suspicion, and something else she could not name. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke, but the words carried an edge. "Why are you standing before the prince's tomb?" she asked. The woman did not turn immediately. She remained still, as if weighing the queen's question against the secrets she carried. Then she slowly lifted her head. Beneath the hood, the queen saw a face shaped by both sorrow and strength, eyes that seemed to hold centuries of pain. "I have come," the woman said softly, her voice like a melody that had been trapped in the dark for too long, "because I loved him." The queen froze. Her brows drew together in a mixture of surprise and confusion. The court had whispered of many things, but none had suggested the prince had loved anyone but the duties of his crown. "You loved him." The queen's tone was cautious. "Who are you?" "I am a widow," the woman said, bowing her head slightly. "Not by law, not by crown, but in truth. My heart belongs to him even now." The queen studied her. There was an air of nobility about this stranger, but also an aura of mystery. Her presence was unsettling, yet not threatening. The woman carried herself as if she had endured great pain, yet she was unbroken. "You speak of love as if it could touch the dead," the queen said. Her voice softened, though she did not lower it entirely. "And yet you stand here at his tomb as if expecting something." The widow's eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "I am expecting nothing from the living world," she said. "But I have not come for the kingdom nor for its people. I have come for him, for what remains of him, and perhaps in some way for myself." The queen felt a strange twist in her chest. She had ruled the kingdom for many years, seen betrayal, intrigue, and sorrow, yet never had anyone spoken so openly of grief, of love in this way. There was honesty in the widow's words, and perhaps a warning too. "Do you think you can awaken him?" the queen asked, curiosity edging out suspicion. The widow's lips curved faintly, almost a sad smile. "No, that is not my power. What is dead cannot fully return. But there are ways to speak to what lingers, ways to touch the echoes of his soul." The queen's hand tightened around the fabric of her robe. She wanted to step back to call her guards, but something held her there. Perhaps it was the sincerity in the widow's eyes, or the strange pull of fate that seemed to bind them to this moment. The silence stretched, filled only by the soft rustle of the wind through the tombstones. The queen's mind raced, thinking of the prince of the court, of the whispers of magic and curses that had begun to seep into the kingdom after his death. and yet she could not turn away. "I will not allow secrets," the queen said finally. "Not here, not now, speak clearly. Who are you truly?" The widow lowered her hood fully, revealing dark hair streaked with silver, eyes that reflected both loss and resilience. "I am someone who loved a prince more than the world allowed, someone who tried and failed to save him. And now I stand here because I cannot let him go, not completely." The queen studied her carefully. The woman's words were not defiance, nor were they empty mourning. There was power in her grief, a quiet, undeniable strength. The queen realized with a shiver that the woman may know more about the prince's death than the court suspected. "You speak in riddles," the queen said softly, though her voice lacked its usual authority. "And yet, I feel you speak truth. Tell me, did you curse him? Or did someone curse him?" The widow shook her head, her eyes reflecting a shadow of pain. "Neither. The curse came long before either of us could change it. He was trapped by fate, by forces older than the crown, older than the kingdom. I loved him enough to try, but even I could not stop what was written in the stars." The queen felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that the woman had not brought harm to the prince, fear that this mystery she had not understood still lingered. The wind stirred, and a low hum seemed to rise from the tomb itself, as if the stones themselves acknowledged the truth of the widow's words. "You speak as if he is still alive," the queen said. "Do you believe he could return?" The widow's eyes softened. "Not fully. But in memory, in spirit, perhaps. There are ways to reach what remains, and sometimes that is enough." The queen took a slow breath. She had lived through battles, seen kings fall, kingdoms crumble. Yet here, in the quiet of the necropolis before the prince's tomb, she felt the weight of her own mortality, the fragility of life, and the power of love that could not be confined by laws or crowns. "I do not understand you," the queen said finally. "And yet I feel drawn to you. Perhaps it is your courage, perhaps it is your sorrow, or perhaps it is the memory of my son speaking through you." The widow bowed her head again, a gesture of both respect and shared grief. "I cannot bring him back as he was, but I can honor him. And in that, perhaps, we can all find a measure of peace." The queen studied her, uncertain whether to trust her or fear her. There was something about this woman that felt ancient, almost timeless, as if she were part of a story that had been written long before the kingdom itself had risen. "You speak of peace," the queen said softly, "and yet your presence stirs unease even in me. Perhaps the dead have not yet finished their work." The widow's lips curved in a faint, mysterious smile. "No, your majesty, some stories do not end with death. Some linger in shadow and memory until they are ready to be told fully." The queen glanced once more at the tomb. Moonlight glinted off the prince's carved face, cold yet serene. Something in her heart shifted, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a strange longing she could not name. "You will not leave, I assume," the queen said, her voice calm but edged with command. The widow's eyes met hers, unwavering. "Not tonight, not while the echoes remain, and perhaps not until the kingdom itself is ready to hear the truth." The queen nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming in the quiet between them. She felt the weight of destiny pressing down, a reminder that some forces, some loves, were stronger than death itself. As the night deepened, the tomb seemed to pulse softly, shadows moving in the corners of the queen's vision. The air grew colder, and the mist thickened, swirling around the widow as if responding to her presence. Then, as if carried on the wind, the widow spoke once more, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until the blood of the crown meets the shadow of love, nothing will rest." The queen froze. The words were not a threat, yet they held a weight she could not ignore. She looked at the widow, and in her eyes saw a reflection of a truth the court would never understand. The love that defied law, the power that lingered in sorrow, and the darkness that had yet to speak. A chill ran through the air. The stones of the tomb trembled slightly, and a low hum seemed to rise from the earth itself. The queen's heart quickened, and she realized that this night, this encounter, would not end quietly. Something ancient had been awakened, and the widow was at its center. The queen took a step back, the cold biting her skin. And yet she could not turn away. She did not know what would come next, but she knew one thing: the story of her son, of the widow, and of the kingdom was only beginning. The widow remained before the tomb, silent once more, as if listening to the very heartbeat of the dead. And in the quiet, the wind carried a strange promise, both haunting and beautiful, that love, even in shadow, could not be silenced. The night stretched on, thick with mist and possibility. And somewhere in the darkness, a presence stirred, a whisper of a prince who could not rest, a woman whose heart refused to break, and a queen who would soon learn that the past has a way of reaching forward into the lives of the living, with power that neither time nor death could diminish. The moonlight fell on the tomb one last time, silver and cold, as if witnessing the first act of a story that would weave sorrow, courage, and love into the fate of the kingdom. And in that moment, both the queen and the widow understood without words that the night was only the beginning. The echo of the widow's prophecy lingered, and with it, the sense that the dead were not finished, that love's shadow could not be denied, and that the kingdom itself would soon tremble with secrets yet untold. The palace gardens were quiet under the moon's silver light. Trees swayed gently in the night wind, their branches scratching soft patterns against the stone paths. Shadows moved like living things, stretching long and strange across the hedges. It was a place of beauty, yet also of secrets, and tonight it seemed to hum with unseen power. The widow walked through the gardens with careful steps. Her dark cloak brushed the dew-covered grass, and her eyes scanned the shadows as if she could feel every whisper of the night. She carried no weapon, no shield, yet there was a strength in her presence, a quiet courage born of love and loss. The queen had followed her, unseen at first, her heart heavy with curiosity and a strange sense of anticipation. She had asked herself countless times why this woman had dared to come so close to her son's tomb. Now, she needed answers, and though her voice would betray her authority, she could not stop herself from speaking. "You move as if you own the night," the queen said softly, stepping from the shadows. The moonlight caught her face, pale and regal. "Tell me, what are you seeking here?" The widow turned slowly, her eyes meeting the queen's. There was no fear in her gaze, only the quiet determination of someone who had faced greater dangers than a ruler's suspicion. "I seek truth," she said, her voice calm, "and perhaps a chance to make peace with what has been lost." The queen studied her carefully. "Peace," she repeated, "and you think peace is found by standing in the shadows, speaking to the dead?" The widow's lips curved in a faint, sad smile. "Peace is never simple. Sometimes it comes in whispers, sometimes in shadows. And sometimes it comes from understanding the forces that brought grief to life." The queen's brow furrowed. She had spent years learning to control the kingdom, to enforce laws, to understand power, but never had she encountered a presence like this woman. She seemed both mortal and something more, a figure who had lived through sorrow too deep to be measured by ordinary hearts. "You speak in riddles," the queen said, her voice low, almost a murmur. "Tell me plainly, what do you know of my son's death?" The widow's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed not like a stranger but like someone who belonged to the past itself. "He was trapped," she said. "Not by anyone alive, not by law, not by betrayal. He was caught by forces older than the crown, older than the kingdom. He tried to resist, but fate was stronger than him." The queen felt a chill run through her. She had always believed in duty and law, in order and justice. Yet here, in the quiet of the moonlit gardens, she understood that some things existed beyond control. Some powers were older, darker, and deeper than the reach of kings and queens. "You speak as if you knew him well," the queen said, her voice softer now. "Did you?" The widow's eyes glimmered with memories she had tried to lock away. "I loved him," she whispered. "More than I could speak, more than I could show. And I tried, Oh, how I tried to save him. The queen's heart tightened. Love was a dangerous thing in her court, a force that could topple kingdoms or inspire courage beyond imagining. She had felt love for her son, fierce and unending, but she had never understood its power to defy fate until she looked at this widow, whose grief seemed to echo across time itself. "You speak of curses," the queen said cautiously. "Do you mean to say he was cursed?" The widow shook her head slowly. "Not cursed by anyone's hand. His life was shadowed by old magic, a destiny he could not escape. I discovered the signs too late, and the prince he suffered. I could not save him in time, though I tried. That is why I am here. That is why I cannot leave." The queen watched her, sensing the truth in every word. She had known sorrow before, but never had she encountered someone who bore it so openly, so completely, without bitterness, without complaint. The widow's grief was a kind of power, raw and dangerous, yet pure in its devotion. "I see," the queen said at last, her voice quiet. "And yet you remain. Why, if he is gone, if he cannot return, why linger in the night?" The widow lifted her gaze to the sky, where the moonlight danced on the leaves and mist. "Because memory lives longer than death. Because the heart does not accept endings it has not chosen. And because there are things left undone. I cannot rest until I have tried, until I have touched what remains, until I have honored him fully." The queen stepped closer, her curiosity mixing with a strange, unfamiliar admiration. "You speak of honor and devotion as if the world itself can bend to your will," she said. "Do you not fear what you cannot control?" The widow's eyes were steady, unwavering. "I fear nothing that comes from love. Fear is for those who surrender to it. I will face what comes, whatever it may be, for him, and for the truth that has yet to speak." The queen felt a shiver run down her spine. She had lived through storms, wars, betrayal, and grief. And yet here, in the moonlight, she realized that the widow's courage surpassed them all. It was a courage born not of ambition or desire for power, but of love, pure, selfless, and enduring. "Very well," the queen said finally. "Then show me. Show me what you know and what you intend to do. Perhaps I will understand." The widow nodded, her expression grave. "There is a place beneath the castle," she said. "A place forgotten by time, where shadows gather and the echoes of the past remain. There I can reach him, or at least I can hear him as he is now, but it is not without danger. The shadows do not always welcome the living, and some truths are heavy to bear." The queen hesitated, then followed. She did not fully understand why, but some force drew her onward. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps it was grief, or perhaps it was the sense that the widow carried the key to something the queen had long feared, an understanding of the prince's fate beyond mortal knowledge. They moved through the palace halls in silence, passing empty corridors where the tapestries swayed in the cold wind. Guards dozed in their posts, unaware of the women moving through the night. At last they reached a hidden staircase, one that descended beneath the castle, into the old catacombs where forgotten kings and queens rested. The air grew colder as they descended, damp and heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching unnaturally, and the queen felt her pulse quicken. She had walked through battlefields and courts filled with intrigue, but never had she felt such a presence pressing against her soul. "This is the place," the widow whispered. "Here the echoes of the past linger and the boundaries between life and death grow thin. He is here, waiting in the space between, though not fully returned. I can reach him, but I cannot hold him. Only his voice, his spirit, will answer." The queen nodded, her mind racing with questions and fear. Yet, despite her trepidation, she did not turn away. She had seen too much sorrow, too many broken hearts, to dismiss the power of what stood before her. The widow knelt on the cold stone floor, placing her hands gently on the etched markings of an ancient circle. Candlelight flickered around them, and the shadows danced like living things. She began to chant softly, words in a language the queen did not recognize, her voice weaving through the air like a thread of silver light. The queen watched, holding her breath. She felt the temperature drop, the very walls seeming to hum with energy. Mist gathered around them, swirling at the edges of the circle, and a faint whisper rose, almost like the wind through the catacombs. Then, as the chanting grew louder, a figure began to appear. Faint at first like smoke, then clearer until the queen's breath caught in her throat. Before them stood the prince or something like him. His form shimmered, neither fully alive nor fully gone, eyes filled with longing, sorrow, and recognition. The widow gasped softly, her hand trembling as it hovered near the apparition. "Do you see?" she whispered. "This is him, but not fully. He is caught between worlds, and I cannot hold him entirely. Only you perhaps can witness him with me." The queen stepped closer, her hand instinctively reaching out, though she did not touch. The prince's gaze met hers, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of loss, of love, of a story interrupted too soon. The prince spoke, his voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "Do you dare save me?" The queen and the widow both froze. The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. The prince's spirit waited, and the choice lay before them: to attempt something beyond the bounds of life, or to let him remain in the shadowed world, unclaimed by either life or death. The queen's heart raced, torn between fear and curiosity, grief and a strange hope. She had ruled with power and law, yet here, in the moonlit catacombs, she felt powerless before the force of love and destiny. The widow knelt still, hands clasped tightly, eyes shining with determination. "I will try," she said softly, almost as if speaking to the prince himself. "I will reach you, even if it costs me everything. I cannot bear to let you fade entirely." The prince's form shimmered, as if responding to her resolve. The air thickened, and the shadows seemed to gather around them, waiting, watching, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The queen understood then that this was no ordinary night, no ordinary grief, no ordinary magic. Something ancient and powerful had been stirred, and the widow had stepped into it willingly. And in that moment, as the prince's eyes met hers, the queen knew that the story was far from over. The shadows in the catacombs seemed to pulse with life. The wind whispered through the stone corridors, carrying the echo of the prince's voice, soft and haunting. "Choose." The queen and the widow exchanged a glance. The choice would define them both, and perhaps the kingdom itself. Somewhere deep in the catacombs, the first threads of destiny began to weave together, fragile and trembling, yet unstoppable. The night held its breath, and the story waited, ready to move forward into danger, hope, and a love that death could not claim. The catacombs were colder now, the shadows deeper, and the air thick with the scent of earth and stone. The flickering candlelight cast strange patterns on the walls, moving like living spirits. The widow remained kneeling within the ancient circle, her hands still resting lightly on the etched symbols. Her eyes were fixed on the prince's shimmering form, caught between life and death, neither fully present nor completely gone. The queen stood behind her, silent, observing the ritual with a mix of fear, awe, and wonder. She had seen many strange things in her life, yet this was unlike anything she had ever imagined. The prince's voice echoed softly in the chamber, like the memory of a dream too fragile to hold, yet too vivid to ignore. "Do you dare save me?" the prince whispered again, his eyes locked on the widow's. There was a weight to his words, a pull of destiny, of longing, that made the queen's heart ache in ways she could not name. The widow's hand trembled slightly as she rose to her knees. "I do," she said softly. "I will not let you fade. I will try, even if the shadows resist, even if the world itself resists." The prince's form flickered, as if reacting to her courage. The air grew colder still, and the candle flames bent toward them as though drawn by an unseen wind. Shadows stretched across the walls like fingers reaching for the living, and the queen felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to step forward to intervene, but some invisible force held her in place. "You cannot do this alone," the queen said finally, her voice steady but low. "The risk, the magic, it is older than both of us. If something goes wrong, it could destroy more than just him." The widow looked up, meeting the queen's gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "I know," she said softly, "but some things are worth the risk. Love cannot wait for permission, cannot wait for safety. I cannot walk away while his spirit lingers, trapped between worlds. If I do nothing, he will be lost forever." The queen hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity, fear and admiration. She had always ruled with logic and law, but here, in the quiet of the catacombs, she realized that some forces could not be measured by law or reason. Some powers were older, deeper, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "Then we must be careful," she said finally. "If you attempt this, we must do it together. I will help you witness, but I cannot interfere directly. The shadows are unpredictable. They do not forgive mistakes." The widow nodded. "Then watch and understand. This is not magic of the crown or the court. It is older than the kingdom itself. It is woven into the fate of the prince, into the very air we breathe." The widow closed her eyes, her lips moving in a soft chant. The words were foreign, older than memory, and the queen felt the vibrations of them resonate through the stones beneath their feet. Mist rose from the circle, curling around the widow and the prince like a living curtain. The prince's form shimmered more clearly, his face now reflecting both sorrow and longing. The queen's heart tightened. She saw in him the son she had lost, the young man who had been full of hope and life, who had loved and dreamed, and yet had been taken too soon. And she saw, too, the connection between him and the widow, a bond older than law, stronger than fear, more enduring than death itself. "You are strong," the prince whispered, his voice soft yet carrying through the chamber. "Stronger than I knew. Do you know what it takes to walk this path, to touch the edge of life and death?" The widow's hands tightened on the circle. "I know. I will not falter. I will not fail you." The prince's form flickered, his eyes reflecting both hope and fear. "Then listen carefully. The world of the living is fragile. The path is narrow. One misstep and I will be lost to the shadows forever. You must be brave. You must be certain of your choice." The queen felt a shiver run through her. She understood now the stakes, not only for the widow and the prince, but for the kingdom itself. If something went wrong, the catacombs could collapse, the shadows could rise, and forces far older than the crown could awaken. Yet despite her fear, she could not tear her eyes away. Something in the widow's determination, something in the prince's gaze, made her heart ache with longing, grief, and hope all at once. The widow rose to her feet, her cloak brushing the stone floor. She extended her hands toward the prince's shimmering form. "I offer my courage, my heart, my will," she said. "I will do what I must to bring you peace, to honor you, to touch the life that remains." The prince's form trembled. The mist swirled violently around them, shadows bending and stretching as if alive. A cold wind swept through the catacombs, extinguishing some of the candles and causing others to flicker wildly. The queen gripped the edge of a stone pillar, her knuckles white, yet she did not look away. "Now," the prince whispered, "it is time. You must choose fully. There is no turning back. Once the path is taken, it will shape all that comes after." The widow's heart pounded. She knew the risks, knew that the shadows could claim her, could trap her alongside the prince, could unravel the delicate balance between life and death. And yet she stepped forward, her hands reaching through the mist, through the shimmer, toward him. A sudden flash of light filled the chamber, bright and cold. The shadows recoiled, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. The prince's form shimmered violently, his eyes wide with both fear and hope. The widow felt a pull in her chest, a tug at her very soul, as if the magic itself was testing her resolve. The queen watched, holding her breath. She could feel the tension of the air, the raw power of the ancient forces at work. The shadows seemed to whisper warnings, voices from beyond, echoing through the stone corridors. Yet the widow did not falter. She pressed forward, steady and calm, her heart set on the impossible. "Do you trust me?" the prince whispered, his voice trembling. "I trust you," the widow said, "and I trust the love that brought us together, even beyond death. That is stronger than fear, stronger than the shadows." The prince's form shivered, the mist swirling around them in a spiral of silver light. Slowly, impossibly, he seemed to grow more solid, more present. His eyes, once distant and ghostly, began to shine with life. Yet there was still a fragility to him, a reminder that he was not yet fully returned. The queen stepped closer, her heart aching with both sorrow and awe. She could feel the weight of destiny pressing down, the pull of forces older than the kingdom itself. And she understood that the widow's courage was not only saving the prince, it was shaping the fate of them all. Suddenly, the prince's eyes flicked toward the shadows, and a shiver ran through the chamber. The air grew colder, and the whispers of the catacombs rose into a chorus of soft, haunting voices. Something was coming, something drawn by the attempt to bridge life and death, something ancient and powerful. The widow's hands tightened on the prince's shimmering form. "Stay with me," she whispered. "I will not let the shadows claim you." The prince's form pulsed with light, as if responding to her will, yet the shadows began to swirl faster, darker, more alive. The queen felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to speak, to act, to protect them, but the air itself seemed to hum with warning. And then, from the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged. Not fully human, not fully spirit, it moved with a grace that was terrifying in its beauty. Its eyes glowed faintly, a cold, piercing light that seemed to measure the hearts of those present. The widow stepped forward, shielding the prince. "I will not let you harm him," she said firmly, her voice echoing through the chamber. The figure paused, as if considering her words. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, carrying through the stone corridors. "You dare to reach beyond death, to touch what was never meant to be touched. Why should the balance not be broken?" The widow's gaze did not falter. "Because love is stronger than fear. Because courage can defy even what is older than the crown. Because he is worth the risk." The figure seemed to shimmer, fading slightly, yet the tension in the room did not ease. The prince's form pulsed violently, caught between the pull of life and the weight of the shadows. The queen felt a shiver run down her spine. She realized then that this was not merely about love or grief. It was about power, fate, and the choices that could shape the kingdom for generations. The prince's voice rose above the whispers of the shadows. "I cannot remain unless you choose fully. Decide, or I will fade, and the shadows will claim all that remains of me." The widow's heart beat faster. She could feel the strain, the pull of magic, the weight of destiny, yet she did not hesitate. She reached out fully, placing both hands on his form. "I choose you," she whispered, her voice firm and clear. "I will not let go." The prince's eyes shone brighter and the mist swirled violently around them. The chamber trembled slightly, and the queen felt the stones beneath her feet shift. The shadows recoiled, yet the figure watching from the darkness remained, silent, measuring, waiting. And then the prince's form began to solidify, slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. Life returned to his eyes, color to his cheeks, and warmth to his presence. The widow's hands trembled, but she held him steady, her heart full of hope and fear intertwined. The queen stepped forward slightly, awe and wonder etched across her face. She could see the prince, alive, fragile, yet returned, and she understood the power of what had just been done. But even in that moment of triumph, the shadows whispered warnings. Something had been awakened. Something older than the crown, older than the kingdom itself, had noticed the defiance. The widow looked at the prince, relief and love mingling in her gaze. "You are here," she whispered. "You are with me." The prince nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "Because of you," he said softly, "because of your courage." But the shadows stirred again, darker and more deliberate. From the corner of the chamber, the figure watched, its eyes glowing faintly, its presence a reminder that even the bravest love must contend with ancient powers. And as the chamber grew still, save for the gentle pulse of the prince's return, a single word echoed softly in the queen's mind, chilling and certain. Choose. The night was far from over, and the path forward would demand more than courage. It would demand sacrifice, trust, and the kind of love that dared defy death itself. The catacombs were quiet now, yet the air still trembled with a tension that refused to fade. The prince stood before the widow, his form solid and alive, yet the shadows in the corners of the chamber hinted that their victory was only temporary. The queen stood a few steps behind, her heart heavy with awe, fear, and a strange, growing admiration for the widow who had risked everything. The prince's eyes met the widow's, a mixture of gratitude, longing, and something deeper she could not yet name. "I am here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Because of you, because of your courage." The widow's chest ached with relief and love. "And I will not let you fade again," she said softly. "Whatever comes, I will face it. We will face it together." The queen stepped closer, the weight of centuries of rule pressing on her shoulders, yet softened by what she had witnessed. "You have done the impossible," she said, her voice calm but filled with wonder. "You have defied death, not through power but through love and courage. There is wisdom in your grief and strength in your heart. It is remarkable." The widow looked at the queen, her expression humble yet proud. "I have only done what I could. Love cannot be measured by power or law. It exists beyond in the choices we make, the risks we take, and the hearts that endure." The prince took a step forward, his hand brushing lightly against the widow's. He was alive, yes, but changed. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had glimpsed the world beyond life, who had felt the pull of shadows and the fragility of mortality. Yet there was hope in him too, the spark of life renewed by devotion and courage. "Your path is not over," the queen said softly, addressing them both. "The kingdom has suffered grief, loss, and fear, but the courage you have shown, it has awakened something that can heal more than just the wounds of the heart. It can bring hope back to all who have lost it." The widow nodded. She understood now that her actions had consequences far beyond her own desires. The prince's return was not merely a miracle for them. It was a ripple through the kingdom, a reminder that love, courage, and sacrifice could defy even fate itself. The shadows in the corners of the chamber stirred once more, but this time they seemed to hesitate, almost reverent. The ancient figure that had watched them earlier remained, its eyes glowing faintly, yet it no longer seemed threatening. Perhaps it recognized the purity of the widow's choice, the strength of her heart, or the courage that had carried her through the impossible. The prince looked at both women, his expression filled with gratitude and awe. "I am alive," he said softly. "Because of you and because someone believed in me beyond reason, beyond fear. I cannot forget this, nor will I forget what you have risked for me." The widow's hand found his, and she held it gently. "And I cannot forget either," she said. "Love is not always safe, nor easy, nor simple, but it endures, it survives, and sometimes it even defies death." The queen watched them, her heart stirring with emotions she had not fully understood until now. She saw the bond between the widow and the prince, a connection forged through sorrow, courage, and devotion, and she recognized something within herself, an acknowledgement that love in all its forms was not a weakness, but a power that could shape destiny itself. "Now," the queen said softly, stepping closer, "we must return to the world above. The kingdom needs the living, the hope you have restored, and the guidance of someone who has seen both the shadow and the light." The widow and the prince nodded. Together they rose, their hands still intertwined. The shadows seemed to bend back, retreating into the corners, leaving the chamber bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. The queen felt a deep sense of calm, as if the ancient forces that had watched them had acknowledged the courage and love that had brought life back to the prince. As they ascended the staircase toward the palace, the air grew warmer, the chill of the catacombs giving way to the familiar sense of the royal halls. The queen walked beside them, her eyes reflecting both pride and understanding. She had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would remain in the kingdom's memory long after the prince had fully recovered. The palace was quiet, the servants long asleep, the banners still hanging in the empty halls. The widow led the prince to a private chamber, a space where he could rest and regain his strength. He sank onto the bed, exhausted yet alive, the weight of his near-death experience heavy on his shoulders. The widow knelt beside him, brushing a hand gently across his arm. "Rest now," she said softly. "You have survived what no one else could have endured. Let your strength return. Let your heart heal." The prince looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I do not know how to repay you," he whispered. "You risked everything for me. You gave me life again." "You do not need to repay me," the widow said. "The choice was mine and my heart guided me. Love does not ask for repayment, it asks for courage and the will to act when it matters most." The prince nodded slowly, understanding the truth of her words. He had glimpsed death, felt the pull of shadows, and yet had returned to life not through magic or power, but through the selfless courage of someone who loved him beyond reason. The queen, standing silently by the door, felt a strange warmth in her heart. She had ruled with wisdom and justice, but she had never truly understood the depth of courage that love could inspire until she had seen it tonight. She stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the widow's shoulder. "You have taught me something precious," the queen said softly. "That courage is not only in battle or law, but in the heart that dares to defy fear, that dares to face the impossible for the sake of love. The kingdom owes you more than words can express." The widow bowed her head slightly, humbled yet proud. "I only did what was right," she said, "and perhaps what was necessary." The prince reached out, taking both the widow's hand and the queen's in his. "Together we have faced death, shadows, and fear," he said. "And together we will rebuild what has been lost. Not just my life, but the hope of the kingdom and the trust that love can endure even the darkest nights." The queen's eyes softened, a rare smile touching her lips. She had seen power, betrayal, and sorrow in her years, yet never had she witnessed something as transformative as the love and courage that had returned the prince to life. The widow looked at the prince, then at the queen, and felt a deep sense of peace. The shadows had not claimed them. The darkness had tested them, yet love and courage had prevailed. The kingdom's future, fragile and uncertain, now held a spark of hope that could not be extinguished. Days passed, and the palace began to awaken with new life. The prince regained his strength, walking through the gardens where the moonlight had once bathed the widow in silver. The queen oversaw the kingdom with renewed wisdom, inspired by the courage she had witnessed. And the widow, once a shadow in the night, became a quiet presence of guidance and hope, honored not by law but by the hearts she had touched. Yet even as life returned to normal, the memory of the catacombs lingered. The shadows whispered softly at the edges of perception, a reminder that the world held mysteries older than the crown, older than the kingdom itself. But the fear had diminished, replaced by a quiet understanding that courage, love, and sacrifice could overcome even the greatest darkness. The prince stood once more before the widow, in the gardens where the first ritual had begun. "You saved me," he said, his voice filled with wonder and gratitude. "And yet, I feel that this is only the beginning. There are paths we must walk together, challenges we must face, and a destiny that awaits beyond the shadows." The widow smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the light of the moon and the strength of her heart. "Then we will face them together," she said. "No fear, no shadow, no darkness can undo what has been done, and even if the road is long, we will walk it side by side." The queen watched them from a distance, a quiet smile on her lips. She understood now that the power of love and courage could shape not only the lives of those involved, but the fate of the kingdom itself. And though shadows remained at the edges of the world, their presence no longer brought fear. For the widow had shown them all that even in the darkest night, love could light a path, courage could defy fate, and hearts that dared to act, even against impossible odds, could bring life and hope where none seemed possible. As the three stood together under the moonlight, the night seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging their triumph. The shadows had tested them, the prince had been caught between worlds, and the widow had risked everything. Yet through it all, love had endured, courage had prevailed, and life had returned. The wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying the echoes of what had been done, and the promise of what was yet to come. The prince, the widow, and the queen understood without words that while the shadows may never fully vanish, the light of courage, love, and sacrifice would always remain to guide them. And so the story reached its close, not with an ending but with a rebirth, a promise that love could endure, courage could triumph, and even the darkest night could give way to a dawn of hope. The kingdom slept beneath the stars, unaware of the miracle that had taken place, yet forever touched by it. And in the quiet, the hearts of the living, the memories of the departed, and the whispers of ancient forces combined in a timeless truth, that love, when brave and pure, can reshape destiny itself. The widow turned to the prince, their hands entwined, and whispered, "Some stories never end. They transform. And this is our beginning." The prince smiled, the first true smile in what had felt like an eternity. "Then let us walk forward together," he said. And under the silver glow of the moon, with shadows watching silently, they did, two hearts, one destiny, and a kingdom reborn.